that building, you can just barely probably see the entryway for that building.
Mentioned the ice cream parlor. That was many high school students would go down there on a Saturday night, perhaps after a date or at the movies or wherever, and wind up at the ice cream parlor.
The ice cream parlor. Yep.
We remember this building, I think most of us do, as being the home of Alcon's department stores. And
that's right.
They were there for many, many years, Mr. Alcone.
That's right. And that building, that store opened because Alcone, the father, used to work in Davidson's, which was a department store which would be located in the vicinity of where Desjardins is now. And I can remember he used to be in the shoe department. And as a young grammar school child after the Second World War, they got a machine in there that would x-ray your feet with your shoes on. And I think every kid in Beverly ran in to look at their feet through the x-ray machine. So I wonder we didn't lose our feet. But he moved from Davidson's and opened up Alcon's dry goods store.
Yeah. We were talking about that the other day, a friend of mine, how they used to make such a big deal of selling you a pair of shoes in the old days. You'd have to sit down and some fellow salesman would come out with a little measuring device. And he'd go back into the back room and come out with a nice box and he'd fit them on. Gosh, today you go down to the shoe store and you sit down, you try them on
yourself.
That's it.
Or you go to the rack and say, I hope these fit.
I have here a note also that it is said that the first drugstore in Beverly was located right on this corner, the Alcon building block here.
You had mentioned that.
1796. So
that's an interesting.
We'll let that one.
Yeah.
Go. Okay, now we're going to take a look at Cabot Street in the other direction, Mike.
Well, I'm looking at Cabot Street from Railroad Avenue, looking down toward town.
Yep.
And this is looking down toward the square, and we're looking at the same area that we were looking at when we were looking at that Mason building. There's an interesting note here. If you look at that picture, you can see this horse and wagon present. You can see the commercial block on the left. And also there's a sign that says Beverly Socialist Club, which is interesting because at the period of time that these pictures were taken at the end of the 19th century, the populist movement in America had a lot of strength at that time. William Jennings Bryan, and it was a third party, a progressive movement. And most cities and towns did have these small groups of people that were looking for such things as the initiative, the referendum, the recall, all these populist movements. They almost elected a president. William Jennings Bryan was defeated by McKinley, but they gained an awful lot of votes, and it was a very popular group.
Interesting in this photograph, Michael Casale, that we're looking at here, the awnings, the ever-present awning downtown Beverly.
Yeah,
all the storefronts had them.
All the storefronts had them. In fact, if it ever rained out, the first shopkeeper would start rolling down his awning, and by the time they got through, you could walk without getting wet. You could walk all the way downtown, and all those awnings were there. They used to use them, they were practical purposes too. In the summertime, there were a number of fruit stores where they would display things on the sidewalk, and the awnings would shade the produce and keep it from getting too hot. But it's
something we don't see anymore.
You don't see that too often anymore.
Well, let's face it, there aren't that many stores down there to be selling this type of merchandise.
That's true.
The commercial building here on the left, Mike, that was quite a place. The first floor was, as we see here, was storefront area. I guess they had offices up on the second floor.
There were offices on the second floor, and a number of music teachers, a number of societies. There were societies. There was, in this building and other buildings like it as we moved down the street, there were societies, the Swedish Club of America. There was a United Shoe Machinery Corporation band had an area down there. The Norwegian Society. There were ethnic societies that were lined up, fraternal organizations, the Knights of Columbus, and the Odd Fellows and so on, before they had built their new building. There were also areas for a number of doctors and dentists as we begin to move further on downtown.
Interesting you mentioned that aspect of the days before television, when everyone, especially the men of the family, they all joined a lodge or they all joined a fraternal organization. And
yes.
you could see that in the newspapers, that they would fully account for their activities every day in the Beverly.
Yes, and they were counted upon by parts of city government to help support events and so on that were happening in the city. I was really surprised in doing a little bit of research for this, how many women's organizations there were. Granted, there were more men, but I was surprised at how many organizations there were for women that were housed in some of these buildings downtown.
And they were separate entities.
They were separate.
Men for the men and the women had their own groups.
That's correct. Yeah.
And this was an era, too, back around the turn of the century, when the temperance movement was
very popular.
Thought quite a bit of around in these areas, and a lot of clubs, the Crystal Lake Club, I believe they call themselves, they were just a group of people that met and forswore the ills of alcohol.
That was a very popular movement at that time, and it kind of it stems from that whole populist movement that we had at that particular time.
If you read the old Beverly Citizens, as you surely have, they were constantly harping on the temperance moves or movements in those days. They would have lecturers and speakers that would come in, and the churches would be filled to capacity.
Absolutely.
And they'd be telling the people not to drink.
Not to drink, that's right.
Stay away from that.
Yeah. This, still on this same picture of Railroad Avenue, an interesting side note here. 100 years ago, probably right at this particular time, or maybe just a little bit earlier, I can remember interviewing Charles Barter, probably in the 1970s. We sat for a long time talking, and he told me that in 1898, at the Spanish-American War, he went to the Bass River School, which is in the location where the Brown School is up near Conant Street. The school children of Beverly were all brought downtown, and he said it was like the biggest field trip that you ever had, because going downtown was quite a thing. And they were all given small American flags, and they lined up on Railroad Avenue, waving the flags to the troops who were marching from the armory to the depot to go fight the Spanish-American War. Yeah. So it would be right at that street 100 years ago right now, 1898.
Yeah. And we have a casualty from that war from Beverly, the Matthew Kelleher Square down at the foot of Stone Street, is in memorial for the fellow that was killed in the Spanish-American War. Okay, we're looking actually on the other side of the street here, Mike. Same direction.
Same direction.
We're looking.
This is we've just moved up just a little bit, and you're looking down toward the where the Bay Bank is and the Warren 5-cent Savings Bank. And the first building that you see, which is no longer there, it's a parking area, was another apothecary, another drugstore. And that building burned down. I want to say that was in the mid-1950s that building burned.
Well, this was the Endicott block, I believe. Like.
Yes. Yeah. And in that building, it's interesting to note a lot of medical offices were in that building, dentists, and if I remember correctly, Dr. Pierre P. Johnson had his office and 4 examination rooms in that building.
Prestigious.
Yes.
For those days.
Yes. Yep.
And as you say, we look down, we can see where the Warren 5 is now. Used to be the Beverly Savings Bank, and of course the Beverly Trust Company was in there too.
That's right. Before the Bay Bank was there.
Before the Bay Bank was there. And of course the trolley track right down the middle of the street.
And then in that next picture, we simply turned around facing the other way, and you're looking down toward the lower end again, and the building on your right would be down near where the branch is on the corner of Milton Street, and you can see the commercial block again, and again down toward the Mason building. It would be standing almost directly in front of where the registry and the Bay Bank is at this present time.
The old Peabody building there with Giles Shoe Store.
Giles Shoe Store, yeah.
He was a relative of mine, you know.
Oh, is that so?
Edmund Giles, yeah. Yep. And one thing we haven't mentioned so far, and I think we should at this point, the magnificent trees, Mike, that used to line the city, the
trees.
Street, Cabot Street.
Yes. I think they're probably trying to do that again, but it was all tree-lined.
Yep.
And there were probably a lot of elm trees. And of course the Dutch elm disease came through and wiped them all out. And then over the years, they were never replaced, and then gradually it seems as though we're trying to do that, which we should.
With the smaller size tree. I imagine the paving of the streets had something to do with the demise of the trees, probably
Probably
the roots
did.
And, you know,
Probably did.
because for so many years this was just a dirt street.
And then, as you say, paving it with asphalt. People didn't know what asphalt did,
Yep.
or macadam, or whatever it was they used.
This right-hand side of this picture here, where the consignment shop is today on the corner of Milton Street, that almost looks today exactly like the buildings are.
It hasn't
1, 2, 3,
changed.
right there.
That's
right
right.
there.
And in fact, in back of that building is where Beverly, the first Britannia ware in America, was, from what I have read,
Up on the hill?
was manufactured up on that hill,
Wow.
right in back there. There's quite a ledge up and through that way.
Yeah. Milton Street's kind of an odd street anyway to
Yes.
begin with. It
Yeah,
kind of goes up over, like you say, a rocky ledge and drops right down onto Broadway there.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go move on to the next photograph here, postal card. Actually, Mike, you might mention that you reproduced these postal cards.
Yes, I did.
Enlarged them.
Yes, I did. I copied them through photographs, and I made slides out of them, and I made enlargements. In fact, some of my enlargements are at City Hall, in the city clerk's office. I have one there. I have a couple of them in the Beverly Credit Union, and there's still a couple, I think, in the administration office down at the school department. And while I was working, I used to put up an exhibit of these photographs and change them about every 6 weeks.
Terrific.
So that people that came in could see the different pictures of old Beverly.
And you still preserve the original postal card?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Super. Okay, what do we have here?
And here we're in front of Milton Street, which we had just mentioned, again looking down toward Ellis Square. And the building immediately on your left is the one that we were talking about, the consignment shop. And across the street again is where the trust company, the Warrant 5 banks and offices were. And then further on down as you approach Broadway is where eventually we had Whitcomb Carter's store, hardware store.
Right.
Always remember those creaky stairs that you used to have to walk up.
It was like a
stairs.
Wild West
It
atmosphere
certainly was.
going up those stairs.
Always
you know.
reminded me of the Wild West. That's right.
The Whitcomb Carters, gosh, that brings back some memories.
Certainly
We were
does.
talking just before the taping, Mike. We further on down here is where Whitcomb Carters originally was, and
Yes.
where the Rogers building is today. We'll talk about that in a
We'll
little
see
bit.
that when it comes up.
Yep.
And then we have, we're standing in front of Broadway now, looking toward, well, you can see City Hall on the right, and you can see the Baptist Church spire, and on the left-hand side you can see just the edge of Bow Street.
Interesting to note there, in this picture, Mike, that City Hall had 4 floors on it in
That's
those
right.
days.
You can see that, you'll be able to see that even clearer in the next picture, but it did have 4 floors on it, and that top floor was an auditorium, and it was removed as part of, I believe it was a WPA project in the 1930s.
Sure.
That top floor was deemed unsafe, and they renovated. But that top floor auditorium served a lot of functions in Beverly. High school graduation was held there. And recitations, the high school recitations, which would be like oral examinations, were held there. The school committee would actually ask questions of the students, and they'd have the graduation. They'd have the graduation dance there as well.
Back in the days of the Civil War, that period of time, the town hall, as it was called in those days, same building, was constantly in use, as you say, for lectures and little socials. They would gather
Yes.
together there. It was a central focal place of the city.
The cities and towns, and it was all part of the Lyceum movement that was taking place at that time. When you mentioned lecturers and guests that would come in and speak, and on topics that were of interest. Temperance. And so that auditorium was used extensively.
Yeah. The history of the building is, I have notes here, it was originally the Andrew Cabot House, one of the three Cabot brothers.
Yes.
In 1785. It became the town hall in 1841, and they enlarged it in 1874. And as you mentioned earlier, in the 30s, the top floor was removed for probably safety reasons.
Safety reasons is what I read.
Charlie Manuel, who we all know as the Manuel Black and White Orchestra, the orchestra first played up there way back in the 1920s, Charlie was telling me. And he said the whole building would shake when people were up there. The orchestra was going full blast, and people were dancing around. It was quite the thing.
Yes, it was, and it was used quite extensively.
We could go ahead.
Across the street from that, of course, is the Oddfellows building.
Yep.
And it's interesting to note in that building that the person that built that building, a fellow named Joseph Williams, was also the builder of the Beverly High School that sits behind, which was Briscoe, the first permanent building that we had for Beverly High School. And if you look at the two buildings, you can see the similarities that he used in constructing.
That must have been one of the 7 wonders of the North Shore, Mike, when that building was put up in the 1870s. People must have stood there and just...
They would have to.
Just in awe of what that building looked like.
They would have to.
Went up.
Yeah, it's truly amazing, and extremely sturdy.
Sure is.
When you look at it, taking up a whole block.
Yep.
It's quite a feat.
And across the street again at the City Hall, the old hitching posts are still there today. Even,
yes, you can still find hitching posts even on some of the side streets, and they were quite common. Now we have parking meters.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And also we don't see the Southwick building here in this photograph, so this was obviously a real early picture of the building. Okay. What's up next, Mike?
We're standing in front of City Hall, and we're looking down Cabot Street. You can just barely see the corner of Abbott Street, and you can see the corner of Bow Street. And there's an empty lot there now where Bell Market is located. Photograph doesn't go far enough back, but St. Peter's Church was there.
Yep.
And the last service that took place at St. Peter's was the Henry Cabot Lodge's marriage.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Was the event that took place there in the 1930s before they moved.
Moved down off of Hale Street.
Yes.
Oh.
And you can look across, you can see where Disjardins Jewelry Store is right now. And you can see the block. I can remember that's where we had that Davidson's dry goods store. Stop and Shop was there.
Liggett's drugstore?
Liggett's drugstore was there. On this side where Bell Market is now, later on, there was an A&P, there was a Kennedy's. Elm Farm was there.
Yeah. The Rogers building, we see, has an extra floor on it in this picture.
Yes, yeah. And you'll be able to see it clearer in a later picture.
I believe there was a fire, that took place there.
There was a fire there, and when they renovated the building, they left that top floor off.
Yeah. Mel DeVoe and other old-timers have told me about this famous fence around the St. Peter's Church. I guess it was the place to congregate on a Saturday night back in the 20s when the marching bands would come down Cabot Street at night, and everyone would be out on parade, walking to and fro, and the young people used to sit on this iron fence here in front of the church and watch the world go by.
Watch the world. That's it. I've heard that. Mel told me that too. Yeah.
Okay, next one.
The next picture is we've just turned around, really. We're in front of Bow Street, and we're looking back towards City Hall and the Oddfellows building and the building that houses the Warren 5-cent Savings Bank. So, this is just a different view. To the right, there was a laundry, a fruit store, and the store that's on the bottom floor of the Oddfellows building is the name of the store was Weber, and it was a shoe store.
Pendrick's shoe store used to be, or probably the same outfit.
Probably the same outfit.
Same outfit, where the Christian Science reading room.
Yes, that's correct.
Later on was to be.
Yep.
And Oddfellow is really, of course, being a stone edifice and all, it hasn't changed hardly at all, has it, over the
No, the only
100 odd years
changes,
that it's been
the changes have been inside. Renovating rooms or whatever, but the outside structure. I can remember Max Rubenstein, we must have walked around that building 20 times trying to figure out where the cornerstone might be.
Oh.
And we never could really find it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, I wanted to mention also in this previous picture, or the 2 pictures ago, that City Hall had a different entrance. You could enter the building actually on the Thorndike Street side.
That's correct.
As well as the front Cabot Street side.
You can see that some of those, you can see where the bricks had blocked that up.
Yep.
And there also used to be public restrooms there.
Oh, well, I remember those. You go down there with a clothespin over your nose. Okay, what's coming next?
And the next picture is from Wallace Street looking toward Ellis Square. And it's just a closer view of that 2 pictures ago. You can see the trolley cars in the middle of the street, and there was a crossover there where the trolley cars could pass one another. It was a single track. Then they'd have a switching device where one would go on the side waiting for the other to pass.
Yeah. This might be an example, Michael, where you talked earlier of they kind of blocked various pieces.
That's right. And it's really obvious here because you can't see any overhead wires.
And obviously these are electric cars.
Electric cars.
Going by.
And those overhead wires there are no telephone poles, if you notice.
Yep.
No wires of any kind there.
Okay. You wouldn't believe this, Mike, but I just got a 5-minute signal here, so we'll do a few more.
Okay.
You're going to come back for sure.
All right.
We're going to continue.
Okay.
What's up?
The next picture is Cabot Street from in front of Federal Street, looking down toward City Hall. And you're looking on the left-hand side, it's at the corner of Hale Street and Cabot Street. And on the right-hand side, you can see that Rogers building and the Southwick building that you had mentioned. And the bottom floor here of the Rogers building is where they had the Woolworths was there.
W.T. Grant was there.
W.T. Grant eventually moved in there.
I think Woolworths might have been a little bit off of that section, because Woolworths was on the corner of Federal.
No, it originally was in this building.
Was it really?
And then it moved,
to the corner?
That's right, yeah.
See, that's my age talking here, Mike.
Well, I don't remember it there either, Ted. I'm just remembering my notes.
The white building there on the right was the Ellingwood estate.
Ellingwood.
And that was quite a family of historical importance here in Beverly.
Yeah.
And next to the Ellington building, we can't see it here, was the Lee and Cressy funeral parlor.
Yes.
I always chuckle when I think of these people. They had an upholstery business, and they sold furniture. They also did a little undertaking on the side.
On the side. At one time, we had several undertakers in town.
Yeah.
I think now there may be 1, 2, 3, 4 in Beverly, but earlier there were a few more.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
This, of course, became eventually, as we know it today, the Lee, Moody, and Russell funeral
That's
home.
right, and they had moved from this location. They bought the parsonage for the Dane Street Congregational Church, and they turned that into their funeral home.
Yep. The fellow name was Israel Lee, I have here in my notes, and he and Freeborn Cressy formed the Lee and Cressy funeral business, and his Israel's son, William Lee, took the business over, moved it, as you say, and took up with Bill Moody.
Yep.
And it became Lee and Moody's down on Dane and Knowlton Street.
Right.
And then, of course, when Bill died, Mr. Russell took over the business.
He had married Bill's daughter, Barbara.
Yeah. Small world.
Yes.
Well, we're coming up to time, I believe, here.
Okay.
Okay, we got 2 minutes left, Mike. Let's do
Okay.
one more
All right.
page, shall we? Talk about the church here.
Unitarian Church, First Parish Church in Beverly, 1667. It's William Howard Taft attended church in that building. It sits between Hale Street and Church Street. That's where Church Street got its name.
This one really got me when you told me about Church Street. Mike, tell our viewers what a Church Street is precisely.
Church Street is one of the shortest streets in Beverly, and it runs between Cabot Street and Essex Street. And I'll bet that it's probably not 15 yards long. But that is Church Street.
Yeah.
And it connects Cabot Street to Essex Street.
Yeah. I always thought that Elm Street would have been the shortest street in Beverly, but I'll bet Church Street has it beat.
I think Church Street has it beat.
Yeah. You mentioned William Taft, a local personality here back around the years of 1910 and 11. He laid the cornerstone for the Beverly YMCA, and as you say, he went to church here at the Unitarian Church.
That's right. He was our first golfing president.
Right.
And he used to play down at Myopia.
Yep.
Used to go down to Myopia down through the back road to Hamilton and come back through Route 1A. He brought 2 automobiles. He had a Stanley steamer and a gasoline-driven.
Yeah. A lot of stories about President Taft. We're out of time, Mike, sad to say.
Okay.
So we're going to have you come back for another program or two. We'll see where this goes, because these old postal cards are really, they're fascinating.
They certainly are.
We want to thank you so much for coming by to Beverly's Times Past, Michael Casale. And
you're quite welcome.
And I'm glad that you're enjoying your retirement these days, but I hear that you're back in the harness, though, a little bit, doing a little substitute work.
Yes, I am, and enjoying it very much.
And
it's nice to be able to do that.
That's the way to do.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Ed Joseph, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll talk to you a little later on. Good night for now.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal. Send me a kiss by wire. Baby, my heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you'll lose me. Then you'll be left alone, baby, telephone. And tell me that I've got a little baby and she's out of sight. I like to talk to her across the telephone. Telephone, never seen my honey, but she's mine, all right. So take a tip and leave this gal, and leave her alone now. Every single morning you will hear me yell. Central picks me up along the line. He connects me with my honey, then I ring the bell. And this is what I say to baby mine. Baby mine. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal. Please send me a kiss by wire. Oh, baby, my heart's on fire, on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you'll lose me. Then you'll be left alone. Baby, telephone and tell me that you're mine. Hello, 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 hello there. Tell me that you're mine.